Hello and welcome to Mark and Carrie. We're back, continue to be socially distanced. Mark has an exciting new background that I'm sure we'll talk about.
Shameless self-promotion.
That's what we need, more.
Exactly.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. The book behind me, virtually, is of course coming out June 17th, available at good bookstores everywhere, we hope. So run out and get a copy. Other than that, I desperately need a haircut.
Yeah, I hear you.
And we were talking about this before we started, but just to get into this now, it tells you a lot about humans, that this is the perfect time for us to not drink, to not eat carbs, to exercise obsessively, because after all, you're in lockdown and you don't need to be anywhere. And none of us are doing what we should.
Zero. I buy vegetables, I eat pasta, and the vegetables rot in the refrigerator. I have such good intentions for myself every day. Future self of me in a pandemic is awesome. Like you said, working out, eating vegetables, calling mom every day. But present Carrie in pandemic, not so great.
Not so great. So is this perhaps a little metaphor or tool we can use for our discussion going forward that, the best laid plans of mice and men and all that sort of stuff? We keep planning to open, we keep planning to stimulate, we keep planning to do things, and it never quite seems to work out as planned. Where do you want to start this week?
Well, there are so many ways to take that, but, we'll start on the political side of stuff. And one angle on that, of course, is the debate around a third relief bill by Congress. I think we've brought back the average age 9 billion, which is the senators of the United States Senate. They seem to be the people we shouldn't be bringing back to work because they're the ones who are most vulnerable because, of course, they're very aged and probably have all sorts of underlying health problems. But they've now called back. There was a bunch of, back and forth whether they were actually going to come back to D.C. or not. But the big debate is around what the content of that third relief bill really looks like. I'm sure all of our listeners will recall everything in the other two relief bills has gotten totally screwed up. Shake Shack got like $10 million that should have gone to small businesses, etc. But I mean, the two things that I noticed out of the debate for this third potential relief bill is that, of course, now Republicans are saying we don't need it. And then the actual content of it is, should we be providing more relief for state and local governments, which seems like they're all have huge deficits, and then infrastructure, which seems to make a lot of sense if we want to have like a works progress sort of thing started, and that would be something that would fulfill the president's campaign promise about building infrastructure. So that sounds really good. But of course now the Senate Republicans are saying no, thank you. We don't even think that we need a third relief bill. So it's the politics on this are not lining up. But I think the unemployment numbers came out this morning. I think it's like, I don't remember the exact percentage, but now basically everybody's unemployed who is actually able to file. And so I wonder if those numbers will start driving the Republicans more towards a third bill.
Well, it depends. I think the Republicans are completely correct on this if you define we as the interests of the Republican Party and their donors.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need this bill because the Fed, as we said last time, has put a floor under asset prices by buying everything. Mm-hmm. The first bill that they did for relief basically gave huge amounts of relief to corporations that had no savings and bailed them out from all their buyback decisions and other decisions. And ultimately, the stock market's going up as the unemployment indicator's going down. We know that Trump and the rest of that side of the House and many Democrats do not measure the health of the American economy by things like the well-being of workers, but actually measure it by the value of the stock market. So stock market's going up. My investments are fine. I don't think we need another bill. Now sell it to me, right? So you've got Pelosi and everyone else saying we need a huge Franklin Roosevelt style thing.
Yeah.
First of all, what is it with the Democrats and the only imagination they can ever grab onto is 90 years ago and it's Roosevelt? And, is that even plausible today? I think of the Works Progress Association. What are you going to, administration? What are we going to do? We're going to basically get 50 to 60,000 unemployed young men and put them in tents in the middle of the desert and build a dam. Is that what we do these days? The world has moved on a bit, right? So speak to that. What's going on in that
Well,
imaginary
no, but
over there?
I'm laughing. Because it's a fundamental problem with the Democratic Party is that it's like with Lincoln and Roosevelt. You're exactly right. And I think it's one of the life support of the Democratic Party is simply like, why is it that we can't move past some old ideas? Why can't we? And I have my questions about, but some sort of Green New Deal. Why can't we move towards where some of the younger representatives, and younger meaning not in their 50s,
Right,
representatives
the 50s.
and senators that are pushing on this sort of stuff. I mean, I think when we think of like bridges and public transportation, that all kind of makes sense to us. But you're right. Like, what part of the workforce are we actually bringing into it if we have people? Yeah, if we have people, young, strong people building bridges.
Right, and the whole myth of, mobility in the United States, like when jobs close down here, people move over there. It just simply isn't true. We're incredibly immobile. Mobility is completely broken down. Right?
Yeah.
You've got huge numbers of people with like obesity as a pre-existing condition. How are you going to mobilize them?
I think it's such an interesting question because what it speaks to where the leadership of the big D Democratic Party is, which is to say that it's been the same for so long that it's just the
Round and round.
Yes,
Right.
yeah. And they've really, this speaks to every political party, but they've really kept out any new ideas because, of course, it's a threat to their own power. So even thinking about the gang, the 4 or 5 women representatives, that they have kind of been kept on the outside of leadership. And of course, they're junior members, etc. But even that, a threat to the core leadership really speaks to we don't have any new ideas because we don't want any new ideas.
Right. Now, if I'm the Republicans and I know exactly what I want to protect my assets, my income, and I define that as the national interest, then once again the Democrats fall right into the playbook. Because, to anticipate something else we'll talk about, Trump's re-election strategy has become crystal clear.
Yeah.
Which is, I'm going to blame China.
Yep.
Right? And I'm going to dump it all on the governors.
Yep.
And if it works, then I win because ultimately, see, you guys are all scaredy cats and I was right and the economy came roaring back. And if it all goes bad, then I'm going to blame China and the governors. And you're banging on about a new deal that's never going to happen. So let's go to the other issue. You've got states that are going bankrupt because they rely on taxes and revenues. All of those are going down. Unemployment's going north. They're being handed the responsibility of fighting the COVID pandemic as their budgets are collapsing. Mm-hmm. Any other country in the world would be like, we need to do something about this. From the Republican point of view, let them go bankrupt because they're not endangering my assets. I don't give a damn.
But it's a great point. I 100% agree with you. Is that it is sort of the President Ford telling New York City to drop dead, but on a much larger scale. But that's what I don't understand, Mark, is that the stock market's going up, but everything else is going down. Is that just a fake confidence, or is that just artificial confidence that for better days ahead? That seems like two things that just can't go in opposite directions.
Well, think about it this way. A lot of stuff that goes into markets is what we might call involuntary money. And here's what that is. If you're still in work and you work at Brown, as I do, Brown's about to make a pension contribution. Mm-hmm. And so are you. And that has to go somewhere. Now, if you put it in cash, it's not doing anything. So you want something better than cash. The Fed has basically said, I'll buy everything. That means that nothing will go to zero. So that means that there will be a recovery, albeit partial. So do you want to sit in cash or do you want to basically get some of that recovery? So everybody piles in and it becomes self-fulfilling. Now, does it have any real legs? Well, I'll refer to a graph that Adam Tooze posted on his Twitter feed a while ago. I don't know the calculations behind this, but it was mind-blowing. That basically, if you factor out companies buying their own shares back, there has been no stock market rally. That's responsible for about 90% of the moves over the past decade. So in a sense, this is an insider game for people who are fortunate enough to have equity, and everybody else can go to hell.
So we have no new ideas, and we're just buying our own stuff.
Yes.
They're just buying their own stuff to inflate and show something on the books that they look much stronger than they might actually be.
Right. Meanwhile, we're not giving small business the loans that they need to survive. We're opening up and we're kind of really pretending that there's been no behavioral change, which is crucially important. So, I'm writing a piece just now. I'm calling this the inverse field of dreams problem.
Yeah.
You can open it, but will they come? And the evidence so far from the states that are beginning to open up is no, they won't, because it turns out people are smart. And, they don't listen to politicians and they trust their governors more than they trust the government, at least the federal government. And they actually think this is the real thing. And nobody wants to say, hey, honey, let's have a great day. How about we abandon our masks, go to a small restaurant filled with people and eat barbecued pig, which is running out and is made in a COVID-filled factory. Then we'll go grab a movie in an air-conditioned place that recirculates all the air. And then we'll fly to Vegas and go gambling. It's just not happening.
Well, and it's fascinating that, two things of that. So we talked about this last time, but the protesters in the state capitals. What's interesting, I've been watching this, Michigan, my home state, is that the governor didn't move. She didn't change her position on anything. And so, I mean, thinking about the polls and thinking about the responsibility of governors is that governors know, some of them do at least, or through their policies, that this isn't what people want. And so they're continuing their stay-at-home orders, or they're continuing a very conservative phased-in approach to things. And so, I mean, that's right for all sorts of political stuff. But it is interesting that they're listening, that the polls show that we don't want to go out and do all the things that you just listed, and that governors are listening to that, at least some of them, to keep things in somewhat lockdown or partial lockdown.
Although I think it was Illinois, it may have been Ohio, today basically said, if your employer asks you to go back to work and you don't, you lose any and all benefits.
Yeah,
so we're forcing people back into an unknown set of risk factors. And of course, what's the one thing the Republicans want to do? Give legal indemnity against employers so that they can't get sued for that. I mean, this is so one-sided. Yeah. It's unbelievable.
And of course, those are not the jobs that are at an academic university, where if you were forced to go back, you have your office, or you have some protection against people sneezing on you.
But if you worked in, let's say, for example, cleaning the dorms,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
If you worked in food services, if you worked in security, right? That may well be the case, even in these sort of more privileged sectors.
Yeah. So there's an article that I was reading about whether the U.S. is a failed state, and I always think that's an interesting argument to have. But I mean, the premise of it was that in a non-failed state, you have a government that actually has policies that regulates testing. You have a government that has economic and fiscal policies. And that the U.S. does not have any of that, and so therefore, and I thought that was an interesting article, because I often, as a political scientist, think of failed states as being Equatorial Guinea or something like that.
Yes, other things.
As opposed to the U.S.
Right.
And so I was both depressed, and I thought, well, wait, is this true? And I was persuaded by it, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you mean by a successful state, right? So, I mean, again, it's those sort of like annoyingly both efficient, humane, just, and equalitarian Scandinavians that usually get held up, right?
Yes.
And there you've got a really fascinating paired comparison, because you've got the Danish lockdown, which is very restrictive, very severe, right? And they really crushed it, and now they're opening up the schools, right?
Yes.
Route number one, right? With very few deaths. And then you got the Swedes, right? The Swedes are like, we're just not doing a lockdown. It's kind of bullshit, and basically we're just telling people to wear masks and be careful and sensible. And their numbers are going up, but they're nowhere near Britain, right? Which is halfway between the two. Now, what is it that makes these societies work? Let's not think about them as failed states. Think about one of the things that makes states work is that people trust their state.
Yes. Yep.
Right?
Trusting government.
And both of these things, if you do survey after survey, you'll find incredibly high levels of social trust and social capital. So when the Swedish government says, this is how the virus works, and we're not going to tell you, we're not going to lock you in your houses or whatever, we're just going to tell you this and expect you to be grown-ups now, and, don't be idiots, don't be stupid, go do this, wear a mask and go home. And they don't, yeah, okay, fine, we'll do it. Right? Same as New Zealand. Exactly the same thing happens, right? You go to the United States and it's like, I need you to wear a mask in Costco. The hell with you! The hell with you! Right? It's like, whoa, what's going on? It's a conspiracy! Everything's a conspiracy! And we have absolutely no trust in our own institutions. Now, the interesting question is how this has come about. My hunch and research has basically suggests that a lot of this has been politically engineered by people who really want dysfunction rather than order. But that's perhaps another conversation.
But I think you're right that, to sow those seeds of dysfunctionality and sow those seeds of total skepticism, of like a total pessimism. This is a topic, this actually weaves well into our next topic, which is all the conspiracy theory that now has moved from conspiracy theory to regular, generally accepted by the Trump administration, is that COVID started in a Wuhan lab and then was released by the Chinese government. I was watching the Sunday shows, and our Secretary of State said that there's significant evidence to show that it was started in a lab. And I thought, There isn't significant evidence for that.
Well,
but
I mean, he's not showing the evidence, right? If there's evidence, show the evidence,
correct,
right?
yeah.
It's simple as that.
Yeah.
I mean, look, so there's certain things that don't add up, right? Irrespective of whether local cadres covered it up so that when the central government were saying that we've only got N number of cases, they didn't really know because everybody's incentive is to cover their arse, all that sort of stuff, right? Entirely plausible that there's that type of dysfunction. All the scientists I've spoken to basically say, look, if you know what you're looking for, you look at this thing, you know that it's natural. It's not manipulated. But, and this is the interesting thing about the Five Eyes report that came out last weekend in the Australian newspaper, The Telegraph, I think it was, that essentially that lab has been taking bat viruses and genetically manipulating them and making them more lethal on the more transmittable, on the ostensible grounds that doing so allows you to research how you would defeat them if they became wild, right?
Yeah.
So basically, right next door to the place where you're saying it happened, you are doing pretty cutting edge and very risky research on the very thing that caused the pandemic.
Right. Yeah.
The genetic match to the existing strains that we have out here in the wild that are causing problem to the one that they had in the lab was 96%. Now that sounds a lot, but remember, you and I are 98% the same as a chimpanzee. So when it comes to genetics, right, small differences matter, right?
Yeah.
So that sounds like it proves something, but maybe it doesn't actually prove something. So there's a lot of kind of smoke swirling around, right?
Yeah.
The type of coronavirus, apparently, that we're looking at is bats that exist on the other side of China.
Yeah.
So how did they end up in a wet market? It's far more likely they came out of a lab, right? And labs make mistakes, right? Now let's assume, this is a conversation I've been having online with a friend of mine called Doug. Hi, Doug. Is that let's assume that all these conspiracy theories are right. Let's not even call them conspiracy theories. Let's say there was a huge screw up in the lab. Now what do you want to do? Do we invade? Right? Do we nuke Wuhan? Right?
Yep.
What exactly is the consequence of this? And the only point in doing this is electoral. It's simply to blame China so that when it goes south here, as it continues to seem to do, then it's not my fault. I mean, you talk about this one, right? Weren't they about to disband the virus task force?
Yeah. But then he contradicted. The president then said, "No, we're not. It was so popular. We're going to keep. It's like a band. We're going to keep it. We're going to keep it going." Contradict himself just a few hours later. But on the China part, I mean, I have been thinking about the political calculus of this a lot. In that, you can, on one hand, it makes sense, right? To blame China for doing this, it started lab, the Xi Jinping didn't tell, all that stuff. And on the other hand, though, you need China for this economic recovery. You need them for masks, and you need them for Lysol wipes, and all this, a million other things. So, how does one both make them the political enemy as well as continue to have some sort of diplomatic and economic, most importantly, economic relationship with them? So, I don't know that for the Trump re-election campaign, it can be as clear as point the finger at them, and then if they win, we're just kidding, let's now be friends. Yeah. That's the needle seems so difficult to thread on that one. And one of the interesting things that I thought, to your point, and doubling down on things, is that the Trump campaign has now just did like a multi-million-dollar ad buy hitting Biden on China. So you can see that this is probably going to be the next couple months of the just hitting Biden on China for, I don't know for what, but exactly underlining the China part of things.
Yeah. Wow.
Trump has, I looked this up as I was prepping for this, $244 million. That's between the Trump re-election and the RNC, compared to Biden, $57 million between the Biden campaign and the DNC. I mean, the cash, I don't even know what the amount more that they have. It's just like $1 zillion more.
So what do you do with that? Because here's the thing, right? If you're relying on turnout, particularly in the context of a pandemic where places might be in a second lockdown and we don't even know if this thing's going to go ahead, let's be perfectly frank, I guess a lot of that's going to be on TV spend.
Yes.
Right? Now, who the hell watches TV?
Nobody.
It's just old people, right? So basically, you're going to go to Fox and you're going to get the 1 million people that watch Tucker every night, or 1.3 million, because that's the most watched show, I think.
Yeah.
CNN's figures are like 800,000, maybe a million, right? This is a drop in the bucket. And you're going to spend all that money, reinforcing what are already partisan divides. If you're on the Trump team, you're not watching CNN.
Yeah.
Right? And there's absolutely no point in putting on Fox a sort of Biden's soft on China thing because you're not going to be watching Fox.
No,
So
and
the whole thing seems to be kind of just bizarrely pointless in a way.
well, but that might be the point. Like, is a presidential campaign even? I mean, what is the point of it?
Yeah.
We could follow the UK mode, but I mean, it is because it's just showing that he's just trying to invigorate and keep his base engaged.
Right.
And so
Exactly.
it's not moving the voters in the battleground states. They're like, who gives a crap about China? Like, I don't have
Right.
a job. None of my family have a job. We're all underemployed or unemployed at this point. Like, we can't leave our house. Like, they don't give a crap about China. So you do wonder how they can move from that
But
from base to
if you can basically keep that base anger going and say, look, the real reason you're like this and the reason things aren't coming back and all that, it's China's fault, right? Then you're able, and you've already proven that you don't
Yeah.
really care about getting medical equipment from anywhere to your medical professionals, right? We fire people for being whistleblowers in hospitals, for God's sake.
Yeah.
So you've proven you don't care about that. Then this, in a sense, makes perfect sense, right? Just basically release all the people that have caused trouble, corrupted Justice Department. You jailed somebody I don't like, he's out. Michael Flynn, out you get, right?
Yep.
And we'll just double down on the strategy of basically China and blame the governors. That's pretty much it.
Trump, the campaign is so good at creating an enemy. That's what their successful playbook has been, is creating an enemy. And there's no enemy for Biden. I mean, and the enemy here will be all of those different things that we've listed for the re-election campaign. I have a serious question for you that I've been thinking a lot about, Blythe.
Go on.
So all of the numbers show that the U.S. economy and China's economy has shrunk by like a zillion percent.
Right.
So, but where does that go? I don't understand. I don't actually know the question to ask
does it
you,
go?
but where does that go? I mean, I understand it. So, for example, at Brown University, we've thus far, no one's been furloughed. No one's salary has been cut. So I'm more conservative in that I'm not spending money at lunch or coffee and that sort of stuff. But I still have the same amount of money coming in. So I kind of understand it on a very personal level, but I don't understand it on the big level of where does all that capital or consumer spending, where does that stuff go when the economy shrinks?
It's a totally fair question, right? So it's not that it goes anywhere. So I've actually been trying to write something along these lines that goes something like this. So in physics, they say that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It's just there, right?
Okay.
And it holds its form in matter at some point, right?
Okay.
So that's it. Now, what happens in the economy is that we have capital. That can be buildings, that can be machinery, it can be software. And then we have labour that basically works it. And we sent all the labour home. Now, we talk about there's been a war against the virus. It's a very unusual war because in a war, people die. The virus is killing people too. But in warfare, the real gig is to destroy the other person's capital. You blow shit up, right? All that sort of stuff. This war, nothing's been destroyed. All the planes are still parked at the airport.
Right.
All the hairdresser salons are still intact. Nothing has happened to them, right? So what we have done over the past 2 months is essentially take the demand driver for all of those things, which is people's spending, and send it home. And when you make them unemployed, you crush that spending even further. So what you're basically doing is taking, if you will, the fuel for consumption out of the economy and sticking it at home. And then as businesses fail, more and more of that fuel's leaking out of the system. So that when you try and get back to work and open up the capital, even if no one's behaviour's changed, even if everyone's like, let's go to the mall, let's do everything, right? Then there's just less kind of like spending fuel around. There's less consumption. So it just shows up essentially as you have less consumption, and that less consumption means less demand. Less demand with basically a capital stock that isn't doing anything just means that economic activity as a whole just falls. And that's basically what we're seeing.
But I mean, so back to the mall analogy. So the malls are back, and we don't do what we've been doing, which is to stay home. And we're like, okay, I do want to go out to the cheese factory and buy a sweater at the Gap. There's just not enough of us doing that.
So far, there's not. And also, when you've made, I think the figure is 15% of the labour force, it's probably closer to 20, unemployed. So imagine that you let's call it 20%, right? So let's say that before all this happened, the American economy is ticking along, and we'll call that level 100, right?
Yeah.
Well, by making 20% of people unemployed, let's forget about whose income's skewed and all the rest of it. Essentially, you've just taken 20% of the purchasing power and said, that's not going to happen anymore.
Right. And then
So that means rather than 5 people in the Apple store, there's 4.
Right. And for the people who are unemployed, that means the service workers, some are who are most vulnerable. They actually tend to outspend versus like Warren Buffett, right? I mean, they spend at a higher level.
They spend everything. That's the classic
income.
paycheck to paycheck. So they're really high consumption drivers. So,
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
Warren Buffett's not going to go on a spending splurge individually with his money and buy 3 million fridges. Right, so but what you need is housing starts, and then people building homes, and then they buy fridges. Right, if all those people who were about to before this happened were thinking about buying a home this year, they're probably not, and that's going to impact building and construction, and that's one of the industries that we're beginning to see is really hit now. And they hire a lot of temporary and hourly workers. So it's kind of like the shock ripples through all these different bits of the economy in different ways.
So when you think about people, turning the economy, opening the country, not like all those bullshit phrases, what do you see economically for the following calendar year? I mean, and we talked about this like J, V, S shape, whatever it is. Like, I mean, what does that look?
And so I think there's 2 stories, and we don't know which one's right. And I hope that my friend Mike is right. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
And my friend Mike basically has this analogy, which is Cape Cod Rentals.
Yeah.
So if you look at Cape, you can do it for Rhode Island as well, right? So if you want a Narragansett beach house for the summer, right? Well, in January, that thing basically rents down here. Rents down here, right? It's like nobody cares, right? And then the closer you get to summer, then you effectively rent it for this very brief period to make all your money. And then guess what? It's very hard to do this in a reverse camera angle. Then it goes down again, right? So essentially what he's saying is what we've done is we've turned the whole economy into a Cape Cod rental problem, right? At the end of the year, the Cape Cod rental is still worth the same. It might have even gone up. The capital's still there, but you only really use it for 3 months. So in a sense, what we've done is we've treated the whole economy as a Cape Cod rental, right? Right now, nobody's making any money, but when you open it back up, hey, it's the summer and you want to go to Cape Cod, we're fine, right? That's one story. That's a very hopeful story. The other one is the one that I'm more afraid of, because I just talk to myself and other people, and I say things like, am I going to go to Vegas anytime soon? Right? So I'll give you an example. I was meant to go to Australia, right? And that's a very long flight.
You should go, though.
Do I really
live there?
Live
there forever.
But do you want to take a 20-hour flight now?
No. I was just. But you could just.
Yeah,
be there.
I know. I get it. I get it. I totally get it. Look, actually, in fact, look, I'll show you. Excuse me a minute. I'm going to go in my virtual background. Hold on, wait.
But okay.
Look at this. Look. This is Nelson, New Zealand.
Holy cow.
Yeah, really. That's nice. That's the definition of nice. I'm going to leave that one on. So there we go. Anyway, where was I? Right. I just think what happens then is the longer you do this, the more people's behavior shift. And we basically, we build up, this tends to happen after pandemics. You see this kind of rate of return on assets falls, and people become much more conservative. They build up cash buffers. They save more. There's much more precautionary savings, right?
Yeah.
And that inevitably leads to a kind of like a permanent downshift in the level of economic activity. So I think the shorter this is, the more likely it is the behavior doesn't shift, the more it's a Cape Cod rental problem. The longer it goes on, and the more that we destroy the economy in the process, because that is what we're doing, right? In terms of like all that demand that isn't being pumped into the economy, and all those people being made unemployed, etc., etc. The more that you get that kind of problem of a behavioural shift, and you get stuck down at a very much lower level, and then everything kind of has to adjust to that. So,
well, and to your point, just about travel, I mean, thinking about corporate travel, that's probably been on the cutting block for a long time. I mean, all the stuff that props up the corporate travel, business travel, I mean, that's just got to go away. I mean, just because as businesses and big corporations now see, you don't need that.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's an easy thing for them just to start to eliminate.
But another way to think about it, though, is the way the airlines were making money was basically densification. So, the classic one was British Airways 777s were becoming 10 across. So it was a 3-4-3 configuration. I mean, just like ridiculous, getting like this, right? That's done, right? That's not going to happen. So how then can you afford to fly these things when you're going to have less flyers? You're basically going to have to de-densify the plane, which essentially means premium economy and business are going to become normal, which means that flights are going to become way more expensive.
Yep.
So people will fly less anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and all of this is contingent upon whether we get a vaccine.
Yeah.
Right? If we don't get a vaccine for this thing and all we've got is prophylactic treatments, then this becomes part of the furniture. Then you're guaranteed that you will shift those behaviors in a permanent way. So
No, I think
so
you're
much
totally
we don't
right.
know.
I mean, just the working part of things, just the really basic of going to an office. I think you can't. I mean, among white collar positions that have that flexibility, until there's a vaccine, how can you do this? And of course, universities are thinking about this for the fall.
No, absolutely.
Fall, etc.
I mean, the one that I find fascinating here is the notion of using an executive order to keep meat packing going. Right. I just don't understand how you basically decree hamburger. Right. I mean, it's you're not going to go in there, and if you do, you will get sick. These are incredibly unsafe places to work.
We cannot. Yeah.
The only people that could do it are basically marginal, undocumented, and vulnerable. So the very people that you want to throw out of the country are the ones that are going to literally save your bacon.
Well, this is what we talked about at least one podcast, if not two, that they're now essential workers, so now they can stay in this country. I mean, that we can't have an executive order decreeing that a plant makes the swabs so we can have more testing, but we can do it for meat. That's when you just...
That's back to your failed state analogy right there.
Yes, yeah. I want to touch on this just very quickly, and this has to do with Joe Biden, and the accusations by Tara Reid, one of his former Senate staffers. It has been interesting, just as an observational, not as a partisan, to see the way that the media. So just coming at this from a media angle, the media has treated this. And how it has been, and how the Republican talking points are, of course, like double standards, hypocrisy, blah blah blah. I do have to say, I have to lay blame at the media and how it has been so clear that the Democrats do not know how to not know how to talk about it, do not know how to handle it. They want it to all go away. They have a candidate. Yeah. They have everything's lined up. Just, dear Lord, can we just hang on till the very end?
It's classic in the sense that these things only work if they apply to all sides.
Yes.
So the Republican side has never accepted Me Too. It just hasn't, right? So the Democrats, because the Republicans don't accept it, embrace it for ideological reasons. They think it's right. But they also embrace it for practical political reasons. This is a good moral stance that we can embrace fully to show that we are better than them, right?
Yes.
Okay, once you do that, you're trapped. You need to follow this through, right? You need to be consistent. And if that means basically taking the form of everybody who's ever accused of anything is thrown under a bus, you're not going to have too many candidates. But that's the position you've embraced. So irrespective of the rights or wrongs of the case, they have built themselves once again into a position whereby it simply doesn't apply to the Republicans. They don't care. They can just throw bricks at them all day, and they're going, well, we embrace this, we need to own it, but we're damn well not going to actually own it on this one because that's different. Yeah, that's hypocrisy.
But this is one of our starting points of the hollowness of the Democratic Party, which is no new ideas, and that we stand on this moral high ground. We're better. And this is what I think part of the coastal elites is, that we're just condescending, patronizing jerks.
Yes,
and
totally.
That we just shoot at and will you do it? But you're right. It only works if it applies to everybody.
It only applies to us.
Yes.
That's the brilliant thing about it. It only applies to us. So then when we don't enforce it on ourselves, it is an act of pure hypocrisy. Absolutely. Yeah.
And it just, you just don't know how to shake the people that need to be shook or whatever, shaken, shook, to think about this in just a sensible sort of way, and just a sensible sort of response as well. So I don't know. This is when the demise of the Democratic Party, you think. I'm now much more leaning towards just burn the whole system down, because there's just, I knew
eventually I would get you there.
Yes.
I mean, you started off as kind of a pretty mainstream Democrat.
Yeah,
but
totally.
You're done.
Yeah.
You're done.
No, the pandemic's done this to me.
It's finally pushed you over the edge. So let's end with a couple of wonderful light-hearted stories from this week. What about the flush heard around the world?
So the Supreme Court, average age 90, I think.
Yes.
They're doing all their stuff on basically conference call, all the arguments. It's actually really fascinating to listen to. I listened to part of it the other morning, and just to hear the Chief Justice cut justices off, and just to hear their questions. Clarence Thomas asked a question for the first time in 100 years.
I was about to say, this is brilliant, because Clarence Thomas can actually now just lie in bed and ignore the entire thing.
Well, that's exactly right. So there was a toilet flush heard in the background. We don't know whose toilet it was, but you just, all of us that have been like, put your thing on mute or seen something in the background
Brilliant.
that it was just, very lighthearted to think of the Supreme Court is also dealing with
It's
this.
nice to know that pooping is not a partisan issue.
It's not. And Supreme Court justices, it turns out, have to use the restroom as well. Or
I-
somebody having to do with them.
I don't know if I'm pleased or horrified by that. What about Kim Il-twinkie? Is he dead or alive?
Well, presumably he's alive. He was seen, either that or a Vegas lookalike who's out of work in Vegas, moved to Pyongyang. He seemed to be alive. So, and they traded fire with South Korea. A few bullets were shot over the DMZ. So Death Watch is still on for Kim Jong-un. I mean, his underlying health conditions are enormous.
No, and this is why there's no COVID in that country, because it would get him in a heartbeat.
In a heartbeat, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
interesting stuff. All right, one last one. The Revenge of Paul McCartney and Wings.
What's that?
Live and let die.
Oh, yeah.
What was that all about?
Wait, I didn't know that was Paul McCartney.
Yeah, it's Paul McCartney. It's Paul McCartney and Wings. He wrote that in '73 for a James Bond film called Live and Let Die.
I'm so non-educated about music because I thought it was like an 80s. I thought it was like a Guns N' Roses song.
Though Guns N' Roses covered it. The original
But I thought
was
that
Paul
they were the original.
No.
know.
The original was Paul
Thank you for
McCartney and
not
Wings. There you go.
shaming me. Well, Trump visited this mask factory in Arizona without wearing a mask and pumped in the background, of course. So this is not lighthearted, but one doesn't really know what to do with it except laugh because, or else we'll cry. Is that Live and Let Die that was playing in the background? Which I wonder if anyone actually thought about that, or if they did and it was just,
Oh, they thought about that. They thought
irony.
about that. I will close with a story about someone who I know who will remain nameless, who really didn't like his future mother-in-law.
Oh,
So they insisted on a church wedding, and when the mother-in-law came in, the following music was played. Dun 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 dun, all the way until she walked all the way up to the top and took her seat, and then it stopped and went back to the other music.
wow. And how are relations now?
No, they're still married.
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
So it wasn't a total death.
No.
Death
It's
knell
amazing
then.
what you can get away with.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
on that note, I think that I'm being ushered out because Jules is on a call, so we're going to have
Oh,
to
I
go.
see.
Let's wrap
Okay.
it up.
Well, great to see you. Thank you. We'll be back. Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Bye.